Hello everyone, and welcome back to another tutorial. And today we'll be looking at creating this scrolling text animation. So scrolling text animation such as this is getting quite popular and it's also quite trendy. And my approach for this will be to use only expressions so I can animate this scrolling text without any keyframe and also with only one single text layer. So let's go ahead and see what's the difference between my method and the usual setup. Okay, first I will explain what's the difference between my method and the usual approach of just creating pre-comps and layers. Okay, so the way I approach this is to just use a single line of text and there's no need to pre-compose anything. It is also easy to customize because we'll be setting up controls for changing the speed, the repetition, and even the text. So there's no keyframe needed, it's entirely driven by expressions. And it's also very easy to make into a preset. So you can just type a new text and then you drop this preset in and it will animate automatically, and you can just easily change the speed and repetition and the text itself. So of course there's also disadvantages to this method, and this is that you can only use text, you cannot really include images inside, okay, because it's purely text driven. And as well as you cannot change the text font size and font weight and any other text styles in the text layer. It is applying to the entire text and not to individual words. But of course, this is not the only method you can use. You can also mix around with different methods and then get the effect that you want. So this is just my approach for it. So let me first explain the theory behind this setup, so then we'll understand why we are typing certain code. So let's have an example text over here, and when we want it to scroll from left to right, we just need to animate its position. But how much for it to move? We need to get the bounding box of this text. So this text has a certain size to it. Okay, in this case, I just set it to 300. Of course, for the actual text, there is a more precise size that we can get with the code. But for now, we are going to use this as an example. And if I go down to its position, okay, and I animate it from left to right. Yeah. Okay, so let's say in 1 second, I'm going to animate from this position and going to move it to the left, which is 300. Okay. And once it reaches the end, we want it to actually jump back to the start and start playing again. For example, if I play it like this, okay, every time it reaches the end, it crosses the entire width of itself, it's going to jump back. Okay, and why would that be useful? So if I were to open this and I'm going to repeat this a few times. Okay, so let's say I'm going to repeat it 5 times. The text is not being repeated because I'm only doing for the shape. Okay, and I'm going to play it. So you'll see that as soon as it crosses itself and it jumps back, okay, it will look seamless. Okay, let me just increase the number of repetition again, maybe to 10. And let me just hide this example first. Okay, so as we play, okay, so you see when it jumps back, it's hardly noticeable. So it looks seamless. Okay, just to show you that it's actually looping back. Okay, if I have the text over there again and I play, so you can see it's actually looping back. So this is the theory behind it, and we're going to use the expression to automatically do this for us. So let's close this, and so this is where we will do the setup. So what we'll do now is we'll just type some text. For example, I will just add a new text layer and I can just say this is an example sentence. So that's just one of it. Okay, so first thing I want to do is to add some controls. Okay, so I will select my text. I will go to the text and effects and I will just type control. Okay, and there's a few controls we want to bring out first. So the first one is we are going to set the number of repetition. After all, if we want this to scroll, we need to repeat a few times. So I'll bring in the slider control because this allows us to add some numbers, and I'll rename this. I will use, let's say, number of reps. So that is the first one I want to add. And of course, as this is scrolling, there is also some speed. So we are going to add another control, slider control, and we're going to name this to speed. And I think this is enough for now. Okay, we're going to create a few more things later. So this should be enough for us to continue first. And there are two things that I want to add the expression to. The first one is the source text, because I want to use the source text to repeat this number of texts before we go into the animation. So I'm going to open up the text layer and I'm going to find the source text under the text here. I will alternate click on the stopwatch to add an expression. Okay, let me just make some space over here. Okay, we're going to be typing quite a little bit. So because we're going to use this source text to repeat our text over here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get the number of repetitions first. So let me just type a / just to write a comment over there. So I know what I'm doing over here. I'm going to just type number of repetitions and we're going to create a variable to hold the number of repetitions. So in this case, I will just call it numrep. And we will get the number of repetitions. We need to add the number of repetitions and we need to also add a dot value at the end. So we can get the value of the slider. In this case, it's currently set to 0. I think before we have any errors, we better put to 1. Maybe 3 times first. Okay, we're going to repeat it 3 times. But before we are done with the number of repetitions, there's one more thing I just want to add, and that is to make this value a whole number. If we were to just use this slider right now, we can actually change the slider to decimal number like 1.5. When we are typing text and we're doing repetition, it doesn't make sense to have a 1.5 repetition, right? Usually when you take the text and you repeat it, it's either 2 times or 3 times. So to prevent any error like that, we're going to make sure that this will come in as a whole number. And to do that, we're going to add this special expression that will take this number and convert into a whole number. And we're going to go to the front of the expression and we're going to type parse int. And follow the capital letter, so parse in small letter, capital I, NT in small letters. Then you can see we have this suggestion. We're going to use that. So we're going to open up a bracket and we need to take this effect until the value. We're going to cut that and place it within the brackets. So that will ensure that our number will come in as a whole number. Now we want to take the input string. Whatever text you have typed, we need to hold it in a variable first, and then later we can do some multiplication. So I'm going to just add another comment and just type the text input string. So this comment is not necessary, it's just for me to know what am I doing over here, because when we are typing expression, especially when we have a lot of code that we're going to write, there are some notes that we can leave around that will help to explain what we are doing. So in this case, I can just write the text input string. And next line, for this we are going to create a new variable. I will just call it an input string. So I know this variable is talking about the input string. Okay, and what is it going to hold? It's going to hold value. So value means this current source text, before we do any expression, what is the text is holding? That is the value of this property. So in this case, that was the text that we wrote just now, which is this is the example sentence. We have 2 variables, one holding the number of repetition and then the other one is holding the input string. Now we're going to do the multiplication. So I'm going to make some more space here. I'm going to type a comment and I'll just say this is the output string. The first thing we want to do is we want to create this new variable for the output string. So now I'll just type output string. And it will be holding empty values. So when we are working with string or text for coding, we need to actually use double quotes to indicate that this will be text. Okay, at the end of it, remember to always add a semicolon. So in JavaScript, when we add semicolon, it's just meant to say full stop and next line. Then now I will do the multiplication. And for this, I'm going to do a for loop. A for loop will allow us to count down the number of repetitions, and every time it reaches 1 rep, what is the action it's going to take. So let's set up the for loop first. So let's type for open brackets. So there's a few things we need to add inside this bracket for this for loop to work correctly. The first one is we need to give a variable to do the counting. So first one, I will just type x. Okay, we just need a variable, so I'll just give a random name like x. And what would this x be? It will be 0 first. Okay, it will start from 0 and then it will start counting. So once I have that, I will put a semicolon and I'll give a little bit of space just to make it easier to read. And then the next one is how many times it should count up to. So I will add x and I'm going to say less than the number of reps. And then when we're done, semicolon. And then finally, we need to add one more argument, and that is to say what will happen after we finish one loop. And we're going to add a x++ at the end. So this is to say that after one loop, it will add 1 onto itself. So it will start at repetition 0. Then after that, it will do its thing, one loop. After that, when the loop is done, it will add 1 to itself. So the x becomes 1. It's to say that now I'm going to the second loop and so on and so forth. Okay, so when that is done, we can open up a curly bracket. So we will type a curly bracket. So this is the chunk of code that we're going to run for each loop. And just as good habit, I'm going to close it first so that I don't forget to close it later on. And I'll just make some space. So this is the area that we're going to type our code that will do the loop. So anyway, we don't need that much space. Actually, we're just going to write one line. So every time it goes to the loop, what we want is to have our output string. Okay, make sure you type the same variable name exactly. So good thing that After Effects will actually auto suggest for you. So we can just press enter and you'll get that exact same name. And what will happen is that it will take the output string and assign it again to the output string. So output string equals output string is the same. It's going to get the same thing, but we are going to add our input string and semicolon. So this is the only line of code we need to put inside this for loop. And let me just delete all the extra space. So every time it goes for one loop, it will be an output string. And then we're going to say this new output string, can you take the old output string? Now add on this new input string. We can now tell the text layer to take the final output. So all we need to do for this is just to type output string. So the very last word is to tell the text layer to use whatever is the final value for showing inside our source text. So once I'm done with this, I can just click away. Oops, something's wrong. Let me see what's missing. Okay, I think it's because I typed wrongly. And yeah, I think I'm missing this wraps. Okay, so it's very important you make sure your names are exactly the same. So it's easier for me if I just like double click and copy and paste. So yeah, it worked. But you can see it's not repeating. So if I look at my number of reps, it's still 1.5. So because 1.5 and then we do a pass integer, so this will convert into a whole number which is 1. So it multiplied by 1 only and there's no change. So if I increase this to like 3, then now it looks correct. So we're actually repeating this text 3 times. So now we also can see from the first letter to the end of the sentence to the next first letter, there is no spacing. So what I can do is I can just double click on the text and just add a space. And maybe just to make it more obvious, I'll add a few more spaces. And you can see this will actually open up the gap. So that's all we have done. We're just repeating the text only. So that is out of the way and we can start to do the animation. Okay, so I will close the source text. We are done with the code over there. And now we are going to do the animation. We can open up the transform. So we can animate our position. But for this scrolling text, I will not use this. So another way of doing the animation for this is I'll be moving the anchor point instead. If I scroll the anchor point left and right, we're actually also moving the text, but without actually touching the position. So what I will do now is I will add the expression on our anchor point. So I'll alternate click on the stopwatch. What we will do is we can use this to start moving from left to right. So a very quick example is that we can just use the time expression. Then we'll do multiply by a certain number. So like let's say minus 300. And of course, this is wrong because the anchor point actually takes in 2 numbers and we have only returned it to 1 number. So what we need to do in this case, we actually have to give back array. And an array we have to indicate with a square bracket. And then we have to close with a square bracket, but it's still 1 number only. So I'm going to, at the end of the time times minus 300, I'm going to add a comma and just give another number like 0. So the first number will correspond to the x value. The second number will correspond to the y. So the y will just leave it at 0. For now, if we exit, you can see there's no more error. And if we play, oh, our text is animating. Very good, without any keyframe. But as you can see, it just moves off screen and it's not going to repeat. So the whole thing over here is we need to give a proper value to the x that will allow it to repeat. And for the y, we can just leave it at 0. I'm going to go back into expression. I'm going to just remove that. And we're going to start adding the code to let it auto scroll. Oops, okay, I need to add back the expression. make more space. Alright, so again, before we do the expression, we need to first get the control numbers. So we also need to get the number of repetitions. So we need to know how many times this text is being repeated before we can calculate the width properly. Again, I'm going to add a comment, type number of reps. Okay, add a new variable, numReps equals to this, and we're going to parse int again, so we get the correct number. I'll just add the bracket at the end, and remember to add a dot value to get the value of the slider, semicolon. Next line, we have already got the number of repetitions. We know this will be 3. And the next one we need to get is actually the entire width of this layer. So we're going to use a very useful expression called sourceRectAtTime. So let's just add a new comment first. I'm going to say width of text layer. Oops, get rid of that. And this one I'll just give a variable name called layer width equals to this layer. So this layer refers to this current layer that this expression is on, which is this text layer, dot sourceRectAtTime. So this is the expression that will allow us to get the calculation of the size of this layer. And there is a bracket at the end because we need to put something in. For this sourceRectAtTime, okay, as the name suggests, right, we're getting the source rectangle at time. So we need to also tell what time we want to use it. So we're just going to use the word time. And this means that we are taking the source rectangle at this current time, wherever the time hit is. That's what this time means. Okay, so that will work in our case. Okay. And for this sourceRectAtTime, they will actually give you 4 values. They'll give you the top and the left position as well as the width and the height. So what we want to do is just get the width only. So at the end of this, we're just going to type a dot and type the word width. So this will allow us to get the width of this rectangle at this time. This rectangle right now actually will look at the current sentence and it will take the entire width. So I have 3 repetitions and the rectangle is actually like super long. But because we know we have repeated this 3 times, okay, if we want to get the size of only one of it, so that means the original, this is the example sentence, we just need to divide it by the number of repetitions to get back the width of a single text layer. So I'm going to add a divide and just type numReps to get back that single layer. I will also want this to scroll at a certain speed, so I just need to get the value of the control. Okay, because remember we have added this control to let us know or to let us set how fast we want this text to scroll. Okay, so instead of putting the number in the code, we can control it up here. So I'm going to get that value as well. So I just type a comment and say scrolling speed. And next line, I will now have another variable. I'll just say scroll speed equals to, then use the pick whip, grab the slider value. So this effect speed slider, and remember to add dot value. And this will let us get the scrolling speed that we have set over here. Okay, currently set to 0. So let's add some number and maybe I'll put 100. So now let's carry on with our animation. Okay, just ignore the error first because we have only typed our expression halfway. Okay, so we have already got all the information we want. The next thing is to do the calculation. Okay, so I'm going to just type another comment and just say moving the text. So we know this is our main area of calculation. We want our x position to be moving. So I'm just going to add a new variable, type x pause. Okay, for x position equals to the time, and then we're going to multiply it by the current scroll speed that we have set. So I'm just going to double click on this, copy and paste it there, and semicolon to end it off. So I'm going to make more line, and remember we have to give back in square brackets. So I'll have the square brackets over there. For the x position, I will return back the x position and give a comma, and I can just put a 0 in the y, and then we can exit out. If we press play, yes, right, it looks correct. Now we are animating our scroll, right? It's just automatically scrolling, no keyframes needed. Okay, if we increase the speed, let's say 300, we play and yep, it's going 3 times as fast, but as expected, it's just going to scroll out and not repeat. So what we want to do now is that whenever one layer width has passed, Okay, we want it to snap back to the original position and start again. It's actually easier than what you think it will be. So I'm just only going to type one line. So I'm going to add the next line, and this one I'll just say restart from start position. So I'm going to create a new variable called the final X position. So after it has done its calculation, this will be the final position. How to calculate the final X position? We will just take our current X position and we are going to add a percentage sign. This is to say modulus, and modulus divide by the layer width. So what does a modulus does? It will take the current X position, divide by the layer width, and it will give the remainder instead of the number. So like if you have 2 divided by 1, it will give 0 because there is no remainder. Okay? But if you take like 5 divided by 2, then it will give you 2 and a remainder of 1. So in this case, when we have the X position modulus by the layer width, we get the remainder, and that remainder is actually the same as the movement that we will get for scrolling the text. But if you don't understand, it's okay, don't worry, just type this and it will work. What we can do now is to take the final X position and say use this final X position instead. And now if we play, you can see that the moment it reaches the end, it will snap back and it will animate from the start position again. So you just keep going on and on for the rest of this comp. Okay, as you can see, once it reaches the end, there is some empty space over here and then it will snap back. I will just increase the number of reps. So I'll increase to 4 times. Now if I play, okay, let's play. Yeah, it's looking good, right? We have the scrolling text already and we don't see any breakage or we don't see any snapping back. So pretty much this is the code that we need to type so we can do our animation of this scrolling text. And what is good about this is that any point of time, just double click and we can add a new text over there. So if it's going to be quite tricky to see what text is that, we can go back to our source text and we can temporarily disable the expression. So if I can type trying, maybe say trying out another example with a longer sentence, spell wrongly, and I can even add / like what I did in the first example, some more space so we can space this out from the next line. Just exit out and remember to enable back our source text. Okay, and we press play and you can see, yes, it works. Right, so it's much easier to change the sentence like this and just have automatic scrolling animation. If you want it to go faster, then you just increase the speed. So let's say 500 and it will go really fast. Okay, if we want it to be slower, then we can press like 20, then it will go at 20. But that's too slow. If you want it to be reversed, we can just put the speed at a negative value. So negative 200, and now it will go from left to right. With this, then actually our expression is done. Just adding the expression in those 2 areas. And now I can show you how we can save this as a preset. What we want to do every time when we want to create another preset, imagine if you type a new sentence, we want to have these controls added and we want to have the expressions also added. So we just need to make sure we save those few things into the preset. First, I'm going to open up my properties so I know that I have the expression on the source text and on the anchor point. So I will select the anchor point and the source text. So I will save these two, but I also need to save the speed and the number of reps. Then what I can do, I can go to the animation and save the animation preset. So I can save this to anywhere. So in this case, I can go into my folder over there. I can just say scrolling text demo and save it there. So if you're saving to any other directory outside of the After Effects presets folder, then you will see this warning message that will pop up just to let you know that, hey, you're not saving in the After Effects directory. Just remember, if you want to use this, then it won't appear inside the library. You need to manually select them. So I just say OK, it will save the preset out. And how we're going to use it? Let's switch this off first, and let me create another text layer. And this one is testing out my preset, exclamation mark, and space equals, in this case maybe space, give some more space. Okay, so once you have typed your text, then I can just go up to the animation, apply the animation preset, and search for the preset that we have saved out, scrolling text demo, double click, and if all works out, you can see that yes, we have our scrolling text animation and we don't have to add the keyframes anymore, right? And you can still freely change the text. I remember we can add maybe / space, yeah, then everything will just work. Right, so important to, before you save the preset, actually, you can see now it's going the wrong direction, is to make sure you have all the values set to the default. So I think I made a mistake here. I shouldn't have put it at 200 or minus 200. Actually, I left it at 100. Maybe the number of reps I usually keep at 3. I will probably save this out again so then I can get a proper default settings for this preset whenever I apply. So that's actually all for creating this scrolling text preset. You can see it's not really that difficult. Once you have added some of the expression and the controls, then save out as a preset, and it's just about applying, and you can get automatic scrolling animation. So it will really speed up your workflow. So I also have created a free preset, so then you can just download and use for your After Effects project. So you can just create a text layer, type anything you want. This is my preset example, exclamation mark, space, dot, space. Okay, that will be my divider. So I can go into my animation presets, apply animation preset, and the one that you can apply first is the free one, scrolling preset free version 1.0. Double click and it will get you exactly where we were at from creating your own setup. So we have our scrolling text. Okay, and I have added a few more controls that will make this easier to control, so we can open up. And I've also renamed the settings and organized them into something easier to see. So we have our text repetition. This is where you increase the number of texts. So let's say 5 times and repeat it 5 times. Scrolling speed, okay, I can change that to 500. So it will scroll faster. Okay. I've even added a reverse direction. So if you want to reverse the direction, I can just click on this instead of changing to minus 500. Okay. So quickly just reverse it. And if you want to make any adjustments to your text, you don't need to go down into the source text and disable the expression. I've added a control over here that allows you to just temporarily disable this effect. So you can make these changes and exit out and just enable it back. And yes, so it all works out. Okay. So this will be very useful for creating your own scrolling text. Feel free to download. It's free on my Ko-fi page. I will put the link below. I have gone beyond creating that free preset, and I'm creating another preset that allows you to also do vertical scrolling as well as to change the text layer instead. So how would that work? Let me just type a text layer first. So this one will be just a placeholder. And I will apply my preset, which is the Scrolling Preset Pro. So we have the same few options for the number of repetitions, like over here to 5, there to 3, as well as our scrolling speed. So scrolling speed and the reverse direction is the same as the free preset, but you can see we have a few extra options. The first one is to allow you to use another layer's text. You can actually type your text on another layer and then tell this text, the scrolling text one, to reference that layer. So why would that be useful? For example, if I have a long line of text, and let me just disable it. So it can be difficult to actually see what you're typing out because it goes out of the frame. When it comes to editing, it's not so easy. And every time you want to edit your text, you need to exit out, move it around, type over there, and then bring it back. So it's very tedious over there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a text layer, and instead of adding a point text over here, I will just drag out a box so at least it will go to a different line if it gets long. Once I have this, then I can use this new text layer to actually be replacing that text over there. So I go back to my first text layer, the one with the scrolling preset, and I can say use another layer's text, and which layer to use. I will use layer number 1 and enable it. And you can see it works. So just scroll it faster and you can see that it will just scroll over there. So this is really useful. Another way that this can be useful is if you have multi-line text. So as you can see, it will take that 3 lines and it will combine together into one long scrolling text. Super useful. the last thing I've added inside for this Pro version is the option to do vertical scroll instead. So if you go into the scrolling, you can see we got horizontal direction. Let me switch this off first. So I will use my current layer again. So the default is that it will scroll horizontally. And let me hide this. But I can also change it to do vertical scrolling. The vertical scrolling will just repeat it vertically, and I can increase the repetitions to maybe 15. Bring it up and just let it scroll. Okay. And I can also just reverse the direction. These are 2 extra features I've added for my Pro preset. So if you like this and you think this would be useful for you, then feel free to just go to my Ko-fi page, just purchase them and just download them, and you can use it in your project so you can help support me as I create new presets. So I hope you have learned something new in creating this scrolling text animation. If you find this video helpful, please help me out by giving this a like and sharing this with your friends. Also subscribe to me if you want to learn more. So I'll be dropping some more tutorials soon, mostly going into expressions and even espresso. And thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.